When an empire conquers your nation, one truth becomes absolute. You submit. You watch their flag fly over your most sacred places. You accept it. This is not theory. This is history. For centuries, occupied peoples learned this lesson in blood. Resist too openly, resist too soon, and you become a name in a mass grave. In April 1941, Nazi Germany proved this rule again. The Wehrmacht rolled through Greece in 24 days. The Greek army, exhausted from defeating Italy in the mountains, crumbled against German panzers and Stukas. By April 27th, Athens fell. The swastika flew over the Acropolis, the ancient hill that had stood as Greece's soul for 25 centuries. The Parthenon, the Temple of Athena, the birthplace of democracy itself, now crowned with Adolf Hitler's flag. The Germans made their intention clear. This was symbolic annihilation. Every Greek in Athens could see that swastika snapping in the Mediterranean wind. A reminder, a warning. Submit. And for the first month, Greece did submit. The king had fled to Egypt. The army was shattered. German and Italian troops patrolled every street. Speaking against the occupation meant torture at Gestapo headquarters. Fighting back meant execution. So Athens stayed quiet. The flag remained. But two 18-year-old students were watching that flag. And on May 30th, 1941, they climbed the Acropolis at midnight, tore it down, and escaped into the night. What the Nazis didn't know was this: symbols work both ways. His name was Manolis Glezos, born September 9th, 1922, on the island of Naxos, 18 years old in May 1941. Law student at the University of Athens. Thin build, intense eyes, the kind of quiet student who absorbs everything and says little. Not an athlete, not a soldier, not the type anyone would expect to humiliate the Wehrmacht. But Manolis Glezos carried something the Germans hadn't accounted for: history. To be Greek in 1941 meant carrying 25 centuries in your bones. The Acropolis wasn't a tourist attraction to him, it was Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis. Every moment his ancestors chose death over submission. And now a swastika hung over it. Glezos had a friend, Apostolos Santas, called Lakis by those who knew him. 19 years old, born February 22nd, 1922. Also a law student. They'd spent years in Athens cafes, arguing philosophy and politics back when Athens was free. Now those cafes were full of German officers drinking Greek wine, laughing about how easily Greece had fallen. On the morning of May 30th, 1941, Glezos and Santas heard the news on the radio. Crete had fallen. The last Greek territory still fighting had surrendered to German paratroopers. Greece was finished. That evening they sat in Glezos's apartment. Through the window, the Acropolis rose against the darkening sky, floodlit by German spotlights. That flag, massive, red with the black swastika, hung from the Propylaea, the ancient gateway to the Parthenon. "It has to come down," Glezos said. Santas looked at him. "They'll shoot us. If they catch us." Think about what that means. These were not commandos. They had no training, no weapons, no escape plan beyond run. They were law students, but they understood something fundamental. Empires rule through symbols. The flag on the Acropolis told every Greek that resistance was futile. Taking it down would tell every Greek the opposite. They'd been planning for days, studying encyclopedias at the National Library, reading about the Acropolis's terrain. They'd discovered something the Germans didn't know: ancient tunnels and caves honeycombed the sacred rock, routes shepherds had used for centuries, paths hidden by stones and brush. The Germans guarded the main entrances. Sentries patrolled every 15 minutes. Floodlights swept the Parthenon. Anyone approaching openly would be spotted immediately and shot. But Glezos and Santas had found a different route. The Pandrosean Cave, a natural passage through the western slope, hidden from German sight lines. It would require climbing in darkness, navigating by feel, moving between patrol cycles. They'd have maybe 20 minutes once they reached the top. 20 minutes to cut down the flag and escape before the next patrol discovered what they'd done. At 9:30 p.m. on May 30th, they learned the German guards at the Propylaea were drinking, getting drunk, celebrating Crete's fall. "Tonight," Glezos said. They dressed in dark clothing. Glezos brought a small knife, dull, meant for cutting rope. Santas brought a torch, wrapped in cloth to dim the light. No weapons, no backup, no plan beyond. Climb, cut, run. At 11 p.m., they left the apartment and walked toward the Acropolis. Above them, the swastika snapped in the wind. The Pandrosean cave entrance is invisible unless you know where to look. A gap between limestone rocks on the western slope, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. Glezos goes first. He squeezes through. The rock scrapes his arms. Inside, the cave is pitch black. They can't use the torch yet. Too visible. German patrols sweep the base of the Acropolis every 10 minutes, so they move by touch, hands on wet stone, feet testing each step before committing weight. The cave slopes upward, steep. The floor is loose gravel that shifts underfoot. Glezos slips. His knee cracks against rock. He freezes, biting down on the pain. Behind him, Santas stops. They wait, listen. Above them, they hear German voices, laughter, boots on stone. The patrol passes. They keep climbing. The cave route takes 30 minutes. 30 minutes of controlled terror. Every scrape of boot on stone sounds like an avalanche. Every breath sounds like a shout. When they finally emerge onto the Acropolis plateau, they lie flat on the ancient marble, lungs burning, listening for alarms. Silence. No shouts. No whistles. The guards haven't seen them. Glezos checks his watch. 11:37 p.m. The next patrol will pass the Propylaea at 11:45. They have 8 minutes. The Propylaea rises ahead of them. Massive Doric columns built in 437 BC, now lit by German floodlights. The flagpole stands at the center of the gateway, 50 feet high. The swastika hangs from the top, 3 meters by 5 meters of red fabric with the black twisted cross in white circle. They move low, staying in shadows between columns. 40 meters to the flagpole. They cover it in 2 minutes, crouched, silent. When they reach the base, Glezos looks up. The flag snaps overhead, enormous, mocking. He pulls out the knife. The flag's ropes are tied around a cleat, standard German naval rigging, thick hemp. Glezos begins sawing. The knife is dull. It barely cuts. He presses harder. The rope frays, strand by strand. Sweat runs into his eyes. Santas whispers, "Manolis." Footsteps. A German guard, 50 meters away, walking his circuit. Cigarette glowing in the dark. He's early. Off schedule, maybe drunk from the celebration. Glezos keeps cutting. Halfway through the first rope. The guard is 40 meters away now, 35. Any second, he'll look up and see 2 figures at the flagpole. The first rope snaps. The flag drops slightly, tilting. Glezos grabs the second rope. This one is thinner. He saws faster, hands shaking. The guard is 25 meters away. 20. Santas hisses, "We have to go." The second rope breaks. The flag falls. 3 meters by 5 meters of Nazi propaganda collapses into Glezos's arms. He bundles it, crushing it against his chest. It's heavy, heavier than he expected, thick wool fabric. The guard stops walking. He's seen something. He raises his rifle, peering into the darkness near the propylaea. Glezos and Santas don't wait. They run. Not back toward the cave. Too slow. Too exposed. They sprint across the Acropolis plateau toward the northern edge where another ancient path descends through ruins. Behind them, the guard shouts in German. An alarm whistle pierces the night. The entire Acropolis garrison wakes up. Glezos reaches the northern path. It's steep, barely a path at all, more like a controlled fall down 45 degrees of loose rock. He doesn't slow down. He runs, half slides, the flag still bundled under his arm. Rocks clatter down ahead of him. His ankle turns. He keeps moving. Behind him, he hears Santas, and behind Santas, German voices, shouting, whistles, searchlights sweep the ruins, cutting through darkness. They reach the base of the Acropolis. The streets of the Plaka district, Athens' oldest neighborhood, a maze of narrow alleys. They know these streets. The Germans don't. They split up. Santas goes west. Glezos goes east, the flag pressed against his chest under his jacket. German trucks roar past, soldiers shouting, searching. Glezos ducks into an alley. He presses himself against a wall, trying to control his breathing. A truck passes the alley entrance, searchlight sweeping. The light touches his feet, freezes, swings back. Glezos doesn't move. He's in shadow, pressed into a doorway. The searchlight lingers for 3 seconds. 5. 10. The truck moves on. Glezos waits 5 more minutes. Then he walks, doesn't run, walks calmly, through back alleys toward his apartment. Every step, he expects German hands on his shoulders. Every corner, he expects rifles pointed at his face. He reaches his building, climbs the stairs, opens his door, closes it behind him. Only then does he look down at what he's carrying. The swastika, the symbol of Nazi Germany, cut down from the Acropolis, in his hands. He folds it carefully. Later, he and Santas will cut it into pieces, small strips. They'll keep some as proof, distribute others to trusted friends, evidence that it happened. But for now, standing in his apartment at midnight on May 30th, 1941, Manolis Glezos allows himself one moment, one breath. He's 18 years old. He's just committed the first act of open resistance in occupied Athens. And he's alive. If stories like this matter to you, stories that never made it into the textbooks, we'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. These moments of defiance shaped history, but they're buried in archives. Your subscription helps us dig them out and bring them into the light. The Nazis discovered the flag was missing at dawn, May 31st. The morning patrol reached the propylaea at 6 a.m., looked up, saw the empty flagpole. For 10 seconds, the guards didn't understand. The flag had been there at midnight. The last patrol had confirmed it. Now, nothing hung from the pole, just rope cut clean. Then they understood. Someone had climbed the Acropolis, bypassed the guards, cut down the Nazi flag, escaped. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. Within an hour, German military police sealed off the Plaka district. Gestapo officers began door-to-door searches, interrogations, arrests of anyone with suspected resistance sympathies. General Wilhelm List, commander of occupying forces in Greece, was informed by 8 a.m. His orders: find them, execute them. By 11 a.m., a new swastika hung from the propylaea. But the damage was done, because by then all of Athens knew. The story had spread through the city like fire through dry grass. Someone had fought back. Someone had stolen the Nazi flag from the Acropolis itself. No one knew who. That was the power of it. It could have been anyone, a soldier, a worker, a student. The mystery amplified the impact. Every Greek in Athens could imagine themselves as the one who did it. On June 1st, the Greek newspaper Eleftheron Vima, under German censorship, published a proclamation. The unidentified culprits responsible for removing the flag had been sentenced to death in absentia. Anyone with information was ordered to come forward. No one did. Glezos and Santas stayed silent, told no one, not their families, not their closest friends. The flag pieces were burned by their mothers to destroy evidence. The secret stayed between the two of them, because talking meant arrest. Arrest meant torture. Torture meant death. But the impact didn't need their names attached. Within 2 months, resistance cells began forming across Athens. Small groups, underground networks, printing presses producing anti-Nazi leaflets, sabotage teams targeting German supply lines. The Greek resistance, EAM-ELAS and others, grew from those first seeds. The flag incident became legend. Greeks called it the night the gods returned. The idea that 2 young Greeks had humiliated the Wehrmacht had proven the occupiers could be defied. It shattered the myth of German invincibility, and the Nazis never identified them. Not in June, not in July. For 9 months, Glezos and Santas remained anonymous. Then, in March 1942, both were arrested. The arrests came for other reasons. By early 1942, both Glezos and Santas had joined the communist resistance, EAM-ELAS. They'd been distributing leaflets, organizing strikes, gathering intelligence on German positions. Informants betrayed them. On March 24, 1942, Gestapo officers arrested Glezos. On the same day, Santas was taken. They were brought to Gestapo headquarters on Merlin Street, interrogated, tortured. The Germans suspected resistance activity, but they had no idea these were the 2 who'd taken the flag. No evidence connected them to the Acropolis incident. The Gestapo officers asked about leaflets, about EAM, about sabotage networks. They never asked about the flag. After 1 month of interrogation, the Germans released them, not out of mercy. They simply couldn't prove enough to justify execution. Glezos was infected with tuberculosis from his treatment. Santas was weakened, but alive. They dodged their death sentences without the Nazis ever knowing why those sentences existed. And they went right back to fighting. What the Germans didn't realize was the strategic impact of that one night in May 1941. The flag incident had done something psychological. It had proven resistance was possible. Before May 30th, Greeks were paralyzed, caught between submission and certain death. After May 30th, they had a third option: defy the occupiers and survive. Greek resistance grew exponentially. By late 1941, partisan networks controlled entire regions of the countryside. German convoys required armed escorts. Rail lines were sabotaged weekly. Telephone lines were cut faster than they could be repaired. What should have been a quiet, manageable occupation became a bleeding wound that drained German resources. Those resources mattered. The Greek campaign tied down German divisions that Hitler needed elsewhere. Winston Churchill later claimed that the Greek resistance delayed Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, by 6 crucial weeks. Whether that delay was caused primarily by Greek resistance, the late spring thaw in Russia, or Hitler's own strategic shifts remains debated by historians. What's clear is this: Greece cost Germany time, troops, and momentum it could not afford to lose. And by the time German armies reached Moscow, winter had arrived. They froze in the Russian snow. The Greek resistance didn't win the war alone, but it helped create the conditions that made German defeat possible. And it started with two teenagers, a dull knife and one symbolic flag. Manolis Glezos lived to be 97 years old. After the Acropolis flag, he fought through the entire occupation, arrested 3 times by the Nazis, tortured, imprisoned, survived. When Greece was liberated in October 1944, Glezos was 22 years old and a veteran of 3 years of partisan warfare. But his defiance didn't end with the Nazis. Post-war Greek governments, backed by Britain and the United States, saw his communist resistance ties as a threat. In March 1948, during the Greek Civil War, he was sentenced to death. Not by Germans this time, but by his own government. The sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after international outcry. He was released in 1954, arrested again in 1958 for espionage, which meant political activity. The Soviet Union issued a postage stamp with his face on it. Greece responded by issuing a stamp of Imre Nagy. Glezos became a Cold War symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. Released in 1962. Arrested again in 1967, when military colonels seized power. 4 more years of prison and exile. Released in 1971. By then, he'd spent 11 years and 4 months in prison, 4 years and 6 months in exile, all for refusing to submit, first to Nazis, then to authoritarian governments. After democracy returned to Greece in 1974, Glezos became a politician, member of parliament, member of the European Parliament, twice. At age 91 in 2014, he was elected to the European Parliament again, making him the oldest MEP in history. He received over 430,000 preferential votes, more than any other candidate in Greece. 430,000 Greeks voted specifically for the man who'd climbed the Acropolis 73 years earlier. In March 2010, at age 87, he was photographed at a protest in Athens, hit in the face by a police tear gas canister, blood streaming down his face, still protesting, still refusing to bend. In 2012, at age 89, he was arrested at another protest, sprayed with tear gas again, still fighting. He died on March 30th, 2020, 97 years old. The boy who climbed the Acropolis at 18 lived nearly 8 more decades. He became a journalist, an author, an activist, a symbol. He never apologized, never regretted. When asked about the flag in 2011, he said simply, "Hitler had said in a speech that Europe is free. We wanted to show him that the fight was just beginning." Apostolos Santas died April 30th, 2011, at age 89. Like Glezos, he fought through the occupation, survived arrests, suffered post-war persecution for his communist ties, spent years in exile and prison camps. He lived in Canada for years after escaping Greece, returned in 1962, spent the rest of his life as an activist and hero. At his funeral, Greek resistance veterans carried his coffin. They called him the last of the lions. Both men refused medals, refused to be turned into propaganda. They insisted, "We were just students. We did what anyone should have done." But that's not true. Most people don't do what they did. Most people submit, stay quiet, survive. Glezos and Santas climbed a guarded hill in darkness. They risked execution for a symbol, and that symbol, that act of defiance, sparked a resistance that helped change the war. May 30 is now commemorated in Greece, the anniversary of the flag. Schools teach it, memorials honor it. On the Acropolis, near the Propylaea, a plaque marks the spot. It doesn't glorify war, it honors defiance. It says, "Here, two young Greeks refuse to accept the unacceptable." And it reminds every visitor, symbols matter. Acts of resistance, no matter how small, matter, because they inspire others. They crack the facade of invincibility. They prove that empires can be humiliated by two determined people. Every like on this video pushes it to someone who's never heard this story. If it deserves to spread, click it. These stories don't tell themselves. Someone has to dig through the archives, verify the facts, and bring them back to life. If you want to see more of that work, subscribe. Comment below with where you're watching from. And if you know any forgotten stories from your country's history, drop them. We might cover them next. Thank you for giving Manolis Glezos and Apostolos Santas the recognition they earned. They fought when it mattered. You remembered when it counted.